All right, hello, this is Mark Young. Maybe we should call this one Mark Young Driveway Productions. Here comes a car. Already worked on this car in a garage. It's a 2000 Subaru Legacy Outback. The rear wheel bearing was humming, and unfortunately, after taking and removing the nut, the axle would not come out of the hub and the bearing. The splines are rusted. Also the axle itself is rusted to the back of the bearing, it looks like. And I tried an air hammer around the hub, tried an air hammer here in the middle of the axle to push it back through, to try to loosen up the rust. But after 2 days of trying that for about an hour each day, it didn't budge. So I tried plan B, which kind of was a Hail Mary, was to see if the rubber boot would fit through the bearing hole of the axle. So I popped the end of the axle out of the rear differential, and take note, I've already removed the analog brake system sensor, so because you don't want to have that hit on the anti-lock ring or anything else that's coming out of here. So I removed the 12mm bolt, tucked that out of the way, and I found the boot would not fit through the hole. The ring for the ABS does, but the rubber boot is just a little bit bigger. And so what I ended up doing was snapping off the metal ring. Let me get that in just a second. Okay, here's the metal ring that was around the rubber boot of the CV axle, holding the boot on. I used a screwdriver to get in underneath it and twisted it until it snapped. And once this ring was off, I could slide the boot back. And what you'll see here is by holding the parking brake system, just holding it out of the way, you can now slide the whole axle right out through the hole now that this boot is able to slide out of the way. And the grease inside didn't look that great, so it's probably due for a replacement anyway. I'm not planning on reusing this because it is still stuck inside the hub and bearing. And so here's the defective wheel bearing itself. And then the question was, will the rest of the axle slide out through? And to answer that question, yes, it does. So the point is, you can remove the whole rear axle. If you can't get this splined shaft apart, you can remove the whole thing, pop this end out of the rear differential. It pops in, pops out, and it will slide right through as long as you take your ABS sensor and move that out of the way. And so that answers that question. I've bought a different hub and bearing assembly and a different rear axle. So now I'm going to put this back together with the newer parts, and these ones are basically junk. So hope that answers the question of how else can you get the rear axle out of a Subaru wagon. This is a 2000. I'm not sure how many years they made them that way, but this has the 4-bolt bearing, as you can see here. 4-bolt system. So if you haven't run into this problem, maybe you could try that too. Good luck. Also, what I was thinking of doing, if I couldn't remove the axle out of the hub system here, is removing this entire assembly, which means this arm under here has 3 bolts that bolt up into the body that holds the mounting bracket in place. And also we have a bolt down here for the suspension, one of the control arms, another one down here on the bottom, another one for the shock, the strut assembly that holds that, and another one up here up top for another control arm type assembly. So it would have been removing all of those bolts to remove this whole system if the axle didn't slide through. So lucky for me it did, and now we can go on from here. Well, before I wrap up this video, I spoke too soon. I thought I could take the new axle, put it in, bring it out through this this end, and then pull it back and slide it into the rear differential. It's too long. So I ended up taking out basically every bolt up here, back here, under here, and for the shock strut mount. And now, as you can see, I've got plenty of play in it. to move it back, get the axle in the differential, and then I've got to put all this back together again. But not as simple as I thought, unless I missed something. And please message me if I did, if you know of a different way other than me taking all these bolts out. I'd be glad to hear it, and hopefully it's not something that I wish I had done that way instead of this way. But it's all apart. Now it's time to put it back together. And I also want to put a link to Brian, whose video I watched. That's what got me started on this whole project. He's got his own YouTube channel, and he's also got his favorite hammer. Brian, I've got mine in case you watch this video. I don't have a name for it yet. I think, what was Brian's name's Lucy, but here's mine. Almost as old as I am, about 30, 35 years old, and I don't know what brand it is, but made in Canada, and it's been with me a long time, and that's what's helped me get a lot of this stuff apart today. Well, it was a bit of a struggle getting all the bolts back in the holes where they needed to go for the control arms and the shock strut mount, things like that. Needed a crowbar to bend the whole hub assembly, tilt it down enough to reconnect the strut, and after that it wasn't so bad. So there it is, all back together again. Time to take it for a test drive.